Greetings and welcome, I'm Ash, and today I think you should try The Witcher 3, the gold standard when it comes to open world RPGs. The game world is absolutely massive and the majority of the locations are well worth visiting. The graphics are some of the best you will encounter in any game today, the characters are well written and quite complex, and most importantly, none of the side quests are designed to waste your time by making you collect a dozen bear asses. That doesn't mean you're going to save any time, however, as The Witcher 3 has already robbed me of well over 100 hours, and because I hate seeing other people have free time, I would like for you to discover how fun it is as well. As I mentioned previously, The Witcher 3 is an open world game, but at its very core it is still an action RPG. This might not sound like it's an important distinction, but when it comes to modern open world games, the developers often choose to go with quantity over quality. The perfect example of this phenomena is the Assassin's Creed series, a whole bunch of games with some great ideas and gameplay mechanics, all needlessly bogged down with annoying go follow the guy quests and pointless padding. Wouldn't you say that the series would be better off if Ubisoft simply cut down on all of the fluff and focused on improving what they already have? If the answer is yes, you'll be glad to hear that The Witcher 3 is an example of what happens when you go down that sort of a route. Instead of having billions of side quests, each nearly identical to the previous one, the various zones in The Witcher 3 only have a couple of quests each, but they offer a much more enjoyable experience. Mind you, The Witcher 3 is still a game, and as such, you'll most likely be tracking down or killing something in nearly every quest, but the key difference is the designers have added compelling reasons for you to do so. Let's take for example the most common of video game side quests, clearing out a bunch of monsters from a certain area. Usually this sort of thing will be solved through sword and sorcery, just running in there and slicing up anything that looks at you funny, and to be perfectly honest, this is often more than enough. The Witcher 3 takes things slightly further by populating these missions with monsters you most likely won't meet in the open world for a very long time, thus ensuring there is at least a little bit of suspense and challenge in each hunt you undertake. However impressive that may be, it's not actually the reason I consider The Witcher 3 side quests so far above all the rest. That honor belongs to the writing and voice acting, as they are so well done they single-handedly elevate what would usually be an ordinary quest into something truly special. Being sent out into a forest to hunt down a bunch of wolves is boring, I've done it a million times. But if the same quest happens because an oddly cheerful merchant asks you for a small favor, then things become interesting. You're no longer just hunting down a couple of wolves, even though that's what's going to happen in the end anyway. You're trying to discover what exactly you've gotten yourself into, and more importantly, what sort of trick this merchant is trying to pull on you. It is entirely possible I'm one of those crazy people that require a specific reason to do anything fun in a video game, but I still have to say that the addition of a compelling story makes every single quest more enjoyable. Nowhere is this more apparent than in the simple fact that I have actually managed to finish The Witcher 3, unlike the previous dozen of open world games I've sort of fizzled out halfway through. And speaking of stories, it's probably high time I mentioned The Witcher 3's strongest element, the narrative. Since the combat system is a bit shaky, though more on that later, it is the storytelling that has to do all of the heavy lifting, and thankfully The Witcher 3 has been hitting the gym. I won't discuss the main plotline since I have such a high chance of ruining it for you by just saying the wrong word, but luckily the side stories are equally as entertaining, so here's a recap of a single, completely random quest I ran into yesterday. Much like some of the most famous novels in history, it all started off with a giant wolf and a fat man crying next to a bleeding tree. Given this rather unusual sight, I decided to engage the fellow in conversation, during which he informed me that this tree was once a love-struck maiden who waited night and day for her knight in shining armor to slay an evil witch and return with a trophy symbolizing his undying devotion. Alas, since real life isn't a fairy tale, the knight probably got turned into a newt somewhere along the way, and the weeping maiden's endless vigil slowly transformed her into a tree, forever to remain waiting for her beloved to come back. Given that I am not a heartless monster, at least not most of the time, I decided to help the maiden by lifting her eternal curse, which naturally meant heading over to the evil witch's lair and ending her reign of terror once and for all. Much to my surprise, however, the witch wasn't really of the evil kind, and through a rather lengthy and most pleasant conversation, I discovered that the knight, well, found a different beloved in the meantime. I still had a curse to lift, so given that my options were to do nothing or to ask the witch for help, I decided to see what she had to say. Unfortunately for me, she was willing to help, provided I do an unspeakable act first. What she required was not blood or sacrifice, but rather for Geralt to prostrate himself in front of her and beg for help like some sort of a peasant. But what can you really do when there's a maiden in trouble? I won't tell you how all of this ends, that is something for you to discover. But needless to say, there are a couple of different outcomes that can happen depending on your choices and how you handle some of the conversations. To repeat once more, this was just a random side quest I ran into while exploring the forest. This isn't a major part of the story or anything like that. It is exactly this kind of content that The Witcher 3 won me over with, because as an RPG fan, I don't care if a world is filled with 17 billion NPCs all doing their daily routine with perfectly crafted precision. I just want some intriguing stories and hard choices with no clear answers. Naturally, I am fully aware this is just my opinion, and I'm sure there are plenty of players out there who couldn't give less of a damn about the story as long as smacking people around with a sword feels good. While I would love to say The Witcher 3 aces this as well, the reality is sadly a bit different. The combat isn't bad, don't get me wrong, but it's the very definition of generic, even though you have a plethora of spells, bombs, potions, elixirs, and anything else you can use to enhance it. In many ways, The Witcher 3 emulates the Dark Souls style of combat, i.e. constantly dodging around, hitting only when the opportunity presents itself, and then dodging away again. But it's nowhere near as polished, so it just feels off. Instead of being able to constantly focus on the monster and its attacks, you'll often completely spaz out and flail in the opposite direction, or the camera will just decide it's not feeling like working today and give you a good, hard look at a nearby wall. These aren't massive issues that will completely kill your enjoyment of The Witcher 3, far from that, but they will constantly be there in the background, always ready to remind you that the combat could have been so much better. If you can get past this rather unfortunate flaw, you will find that The Witcher 3 has plenty of interesting locations to explore. While there is a whole bunch of filler out in the open world, mostly monster nests and brigand ambushes, pretty much every notable location is exactly that, notable. Some of them are reserved for side quests, others are just there to provide a challenging fight and a whole bunch of loot, but they are always a joy to find as it's obvious that some designer has spent a lot of time handcrafting them. It also helps that the entirety of The Witcher 3 is absolutely gorgeous. Despite being set in a rather depressing world filled with constant warfare and marauding hordes of monsters, The Witcher 3 manages to uphold a relaxing atmosphere purely due to the use of colors in its environment. This might sound a bit silly since a field full of lilies isn't exactly the best setting for a monster murder mystery, but the contrast is exactly what makes these encounters so significant. The fact that terrible things can happen in broad daylight while you're roaming an otherwise normal countryside is precisely what makes them far more terrifying than if they happened in an area that's constantly dark and filled with the screams of the damned. There are also areas where The Witcher 3 puts on its horror hat and tries its very best to scare you to your bones. Worry not, you horror fans, but the point is, it manages to strike a nice balance. The end result of all of this is a world so lovely and so inviting it's hard to just stop in the middle of nowhere. You just have to see what exactly that giant tower in the distance is all about. Whoa there, Roach. Just in case you haven't noticed already, I'm a massive fan of The Witcher 3, as it's pretty much designed around exploration, storytelling, and constant conversations with a cast of truly outstanding characters. All things I greatly appreciate seeing in my RPGs. When you combine all of this with an absolutely gigantic open world and some of the best graphics you can find in any game out there, you get an open world RPG that I would use as a gold standard to judge any such future games. If you're a fan of deep, mature RPGs where you actually get to make difficult choices with far-reaching consequences, then I do believe you should try The Witcher 3 and its 2 expansions. They contain some of my favorite characters of all time, along with some of my favorite stories, so hopefully you'll find the same sort of enjoyment as well. Thank you guys for watching, and if you enjoyed this, or even if you didn't, please do let me know, and if you would like to see more, you can either subscribe here, or you can check out the website link down below. That one tends to be updated far more frequently. With all of that said, I hope you guys have a nice day, and I will see you soon. See ya!